share my screen here. We'll get started. All right, so can everyone see my screen? All right. So thank you for joining in tonight's discussion. This week we're going to talk about international supply chain management. And in terms of what we have to review this week or our deliverables this week, you are to read chapter 6 and 7 on international considerations, as well as the international and functional areas of supply chain management for your assignment this week. As with other weeks, you have to ensure that your originality score is below 35%. You are to ensure that you are staying up to date with your IntelliPath assignments because, especially now, people who are waiting until the last minute, you don't get behind with those IntelliPath assignments. And for you all who understand the work that goes into those assignments, you know that it takes quite a bit of time for you to complete those assignments. So I will say, if you're missing an IntelliPath assignment, I would highly suggest that you get those assignments completed this week. Okay. Um, and then again, if you have to do any previous assignments for the class, to get those in now, because you will only receive a 10% late penalty. So I highly suggest that we're getting close to the term. So if you have any work to make up, please, please, please get that in now. Our last chat's going to be next Tuesday instead of next Wednesday. So for our assignment this week, we want to review a real world company. Now, I always put it out there for everyone this week, where I know this says Walmart, Starbucks, and Apple, but you're not going to get penalized for it. But that company is easy. That company's too. Those companies are too easy. So I always ask people to kind of look outside of the box and find a company that you're interested in, just to see what their supply chain network and how their supply chain network is made up. That is very important because they will have different strategies. They will have different objectives than the WalMarts, than the Amazons, than the Starbucks. Because those who are not reviewing this video or not attending tonight, they're going to choose that low hanging fruit. They're going to choose the WalMarts. They're going to choose the Amazons. They're going to choose the Apple. So it's good to get a different perspective. It's good to see another global company, to see how they get their goods from the manufacturer to the consumer. Now, I will say that I will say that also, another thing is, if this call ends at 9:15, just be patient, and I will kick off another session, and I'll send out a chat and a announcement email. So if that happens, then I'll hop right back on to another discussion. So that's how we're going to do that. That's what I've been thinking about the whole time. I'm not sure if this session's going to end or not. But in terms of another company, so I'm a big Tesla fan. So Tesla has built what they refer to as gigafactories. So they have a gigafactory in outside of Sparks, Nevada, that they said that it's the size of 30 football fields or something like that. And once construction is complete on that site, it's going to be the largest building in the world by global footprint. So a supply chain facility, a manufacturing facility, is going to be the largest building in the world, right? So Tesla may be a good company to talk about. So with those gigafactories, they are currently building. They've just built, I should say, they've just built a gigafactory in China to address that Chinese market in terms of cars. And then Elon Musk just announced that they are going to break ground on a gigafactory in Texas, where they're going to build the Cybertrucks. So once my Cybertruck is ready, maybe it's going to come out of that Texas facility. So again, for example, that is an excellent example. I would love to see what you find on Tesla in terms of supply chain management, and it's going to be very interesting because although you're going to have uh, car manufacturers in different parts of the world like Toyota, Ford, Kia, Mercedes, BMW, their approach, their plan to get their products from the factory to the consumer is going to be dramatically different than what Tesla does. So that's going to be an excellent case study, and I'm very interested to see what you find on Tesla. So again, you're going to look at how they're going to distribute their goods from that facility to their consumers. You're going to see what the steps involved in placing an order and shipping it to the customer. So, for example, you'll buy a Ford or Chevrolet, where you just simply go to the car dealership, choose the one you want, and you drive it off the lot. Where Tesla's model is completely different. Where in the past you would have to go on the Tesla site, put in all of your height, weight, things like that. Then someone would come to your house. They would do your precise measurements, and then they would go in and they would manufacture the car only after they met you face to face and got your measurements. So again, they're in the same exact Ford and Tesla are in the same exact industry, but the steps involved to the time you place the order for that car to the time that you receive it are totally different, right? And it's aligned with that business model, that business mission, that business vision. So that's what you're going to see with some of these organizations. So, and you're also going to assess what are the advantages and disadvantages of international logistics. So, of course, the advantages are is going to be the reduction in cost. What the disadvantages, one of which I highlighted, is going to be there's a little bit of risk involved. Um, so you're going to see that, and I want you to dig a little deeper, find some current research in terms of how has the current pandemic impacted the organization's supply chain network. How has it impacted operations from a global perspective? Because if you find current research, you're gonna find something on that impact. I guarantee it. Especially if you're doing an international company. So that's what you're gonna look at this week. And again, I would ask that you look outside of the typical Walmart, Starbucks, Apple, Amazon, and try to dig deeper into finding one company that everyone's not going to talk about for the most part. Any questions on that? Yeah, Lowe's is a good example. Exactly. Let's see here, Costco or Lowe's. Yeah, Lowe's or Costco. Costco's a good example. Lowe's is a good example. And to talk about that, so how about y'all tag team? So someone does Lowe's, someone does Costco, and then once you each do your initial posts, then you all can compare and contrast the two because they're not really competitors, but they're in that same industry, right? So that would be very good in that their model's going to be very similar. They kind of cater to a different demographic, but they both fall into that retail giant space. Okay, so that would be a good one. Let's see here. I'm just going through the comments. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Lowe's is only in North America, but whenever we talk about international logistics, we can include Canada and Mexico in that. So you can get away with that. I think they're in Mexico. I'm not sure. So in your responses, again, we want to look at and then compare and contrast the supply chain network of the company that you selected and contrast it to one of your peers' companies. So, for example, if I did Costco, I'm going to compare and contrast Costco to Lowe's. So that's what we're working. That's what we're asking about there in that requirement one, and then in requirement two, we want to see at what part of the supply chain that company operates in. Okay, so whenever I see that, I have to say that Lowe's. Lowe's is going to be a retailer. Lowe's is going to be at the toward the end of the supply chain, where Tesla. All right, Tim, I see it. I'll see you later. Thanks. I got you for into your credit. Where Tesla is going to operate throughout multiple areas of the supply chain. And what I mean by that is that they manufacture the product, Tesla will distribute the product. Tesla also can be considered a part of the retail aspect of the product because they actually sell the cars. You can't go to a local dealership to get a Tesla. You have to go to a Tesla dealership to get a Tesla, right? Another example of that is, just for examples, because I said to go look outside the box. Amazon. Amazon is the distributor, right? Amazon stores the inventory, so they make up two facets of the supply chain, right? It does not just stop with the storage of inventory; they also distribute it. So if you've seen those Amazon Sprinter vans around your neighborhood, I know in some states, Amazon distributes their own product in their little Sprinter vans as opposed to FedEx and UPS. So Amazon makes up different aspects of the supply chain. So you're going to see that as you're researching your companies, and I just that is part of that discussion. So in terms of the third aspect, this is a big assignment. So you're going to go deeper from an international perspective, and you're going to think about additional factors in terms of labor relations. How does culture have an impact on the supply chain? How does the environment within that geographical region have an impact on the supply chain? So you're going to get deeper in that, and I will give you a hint that these environmental factors, if you're having a tough time finding those, look for either look for corporate social responsibility on that company, or look for GRI reports. GRI, I'm gonna type that in the chat. So what GRI is GRI stands for the Global Reporting Initiative, and the Global Reporting Initiative is a there we go. Home, I found it. The Global Reporting Initiative is a voluntary. Can you see my screen with the website? I don't know what happens whenever. Oh man, no, I lost the chat. Okay. So GRI is a voluntary initiative, a voluntary global initiative that uses a standardized report for organizations to share how they are positively contributing to the triple bottom line. Now, does anyone has anyone heard of the triple bottom line? If so, what does that stand for? So the triple bottom line stands for people, planet, and profit. Whereas you want to be more have more focus on the people aspect, right? The contributing, having a focus on your people, having a focus on higher salaries, on health care, on on understanding that the people of your organization, your workforce, is a contributing factor to your success, sustainability, and profitability. Now, the planet aspect is that um, the environmental aspect of the triple bottom line, and that is how the organization contributes to the environment. You know, how they're looking to reduce their global footprint, if you will. And then the profitability aspect is that where I can essentially, if I take a focus on the people aspect and the environmental aspect, then the profits will follow. Now, once again, I think we talked about this where there was one study that I always refer to as one of my favorite TED talks, where Alex Edmonds is a professor at the University of London, and he did a long-term study to understand if the triple bottom line has a positive impact on profitability for the organization. So he looked at the top 100 companies to work for in the United States, and he found that those top 100 companies to work for that provided additional time off, right? To provide additional health care, to provide health care to the employees' spouses for free. Those companies beat their competitors within their respective industries by, I think, 5 to 6% year over year. So his argument was that stakeholders of an organization, what are stakeholders? And also for, all right, what about now? I'm looking for something while we're going to do that. Did everyone hear my question about the stakeholders? What are stakeholders? I'm looking for one report. Yes, so everyone who has had an interest in the business, correct. So the to this report, the misconception is that stakeholders felt that if you have an increased provide increased investment to an organization's workforce, you're going to have a negative impact on the true bottom line. But again, Dr. Edmonds found that the more you increase your investment to the people, the more you increase your investment to the environment, the greater the positive impact is on the organization's triple bottom line. So that's very important. And I would also say, so again, if you're having trouble finding information on labor relations, on regulations, on sustainability, which are environmental factors, go into research. Just search GRI to see if that organization has a GRI report or a sustainability report, and then you're able to find information on that. So we're going to get into other techniques, but again, I would say to look at the first off, look at the global reach of that company. I say to see if you can assess if there are any kind of developments that are emerging. Also, see if there are any kind of impacts that arose from the pandemic. Okay. So if you are able to address those areas, if you're able to respond to your peers on that area, on those areas, you'll have no problem with that discussion. I know it seemed like a lot, but once you find that information on one site, you're going to have all your answers right there in one spot. But again, I think that the biggest thing for me is for you to research and to find how your selected company addressed the pandemic, issues that arose, because there's a lot of positive outcomes from that, in that it brought employees closer together. So employees from around the world, it brought them closer together. It made them collaborate with each other. It made them learn from each other. It made them be more innovative, right? So look at how the pandemic had an impact on the organization and the outcomes of the pandemic. Again, this meeting was from to 9 to 9:15, so we'll see what happens on this recording. So for our global logistics and supply chain, what we're going to talk about is, what are the benefits to developing a global supply chain network? Now, on the surface, we're going to realize some positive impacts from a cost savings perspective, because I can have lower labor rates if I have a supplier or manufacturer overseas, because I can produce those products for a cheaper price, right? Now I can also have, because I have a number because I have increased my number of suppliers. Now I can include quality as a metric in my product development, in my materials that I purchased, right? So now I'm leveraging, quality to say, if you're not at this particular level of quality, if you're not at this level of on time delivery, I can go to another supplier, right? So you're leveraging your purchasing power, your negotiation power, by expanding globally. Now we're going to get to the drop shortly, but from a coordination perspective, there's going to be a lot of considerations from a purchasing aspect, which we'll talk about, from a logistics aspect of how we're going to get the products from those international suppliers to our facilities in North America. Uh, you're also going to have some operational considerations where you're operating overseas. You have business partners overseas, but you're unable to manage and monitor those overseas operations. So that's a consideration. In some cases, that's a concern. And then you also have to have that you have that supplier consideration as well, where if you have a business partner overseas, you have to understand, just like operations, you have to understand the monitoring of that overseas supplier to ensure that they're in compliance, that they are performing ethical practices, right? To ensure that they are not having a negative impact on your company brand or image. So once we get to the supplier aspect, I will bring up an Apple example that it wasn't Apple who performed these unethical activities, but it kind of tarnished Apple's name, kind of tarnished Apple's brand. Now, because Apple is so massive, they quickly rebounded from it. But if it was a small manufacturing organization, that could have potentially had um, business closing ramifications. Okay. So, whenever we're discussing global expansion, the first thing that we do is we have to evaluate that product or service readiness. We have to evaluate whether or not we think that we're ready to enter that particular market. Okay. And we make that assessment to say, okay, is my product or service ready to be imported? Does that product or service fit the needs of that particular geographical location? Does it fit the the demographic, I should say, right, from that geographical location? The perfect example that I can think of is McDonald's. So, because in India, because those in India worship cows, right? McDonald's could not take their menu from the U.S. and just integrate it into India. It would not work. So you have to understand those cultural values, those cultural behaviors, and you have to say, okay, what's the gap in between my product or service versus the cultures, and values within that geographical region. So going back to Walmart, if Walmart provided that, I mean, not Walmart. If McDonald's did that assessment, they would say, okay, we have to make an adjustment to our menu, right? We have to take all this beef out of our menu, and we have to substitute it for other offerings, for example. So that's what we talk about from a product or service readiness perspective. And from a company readiness perspective, do we have, and this, so when we say company readiness perspective, are we knowledgeable of those cultural differences, the cultural norms within that geographical region, right? Do we have individuals within that geographical region to support that particular location, right? So that's another consideration that we have. So you have that product perspective with the product readiness, and then you have the people perspective with that company readiness. Do we have the knowledge that will be required to be successful within that region? Any questions on that global expansion readiness aspect? Okay. So within global expansion, we'll have a number of different strategies, approaches, and techniques. And with our starting at the top, and we're going to go through this in more detail shortly. Starting at the top, we have our simple, basic business strategy, and that's where we talk about things such as licensing. So, McDonald's, perfect example, right? So I'm just going to license that McDonald's name, and because it has that global recognition, then McDonald's Corp gets a kickback from my profits. So that's the basic strategy. From a global strategy, that is where we're going to realize those economies of scale. That's where we're going to have to begin to understand from a basic perspective the cultural impacts of our products or services. With the multi-domestic, that's where we're going to look at individuals within that geographical region. We're going to partner with individuals within that geographical region to kind of create that synergy, create that partnership, to create that win win among someone because their value is of bringing in the different aspects of that region, that geographical region, right? So that's where you start talking about those franchises. That's where you start talking about those joint ventures where you're going to work with someone within that region. Transnational, that's where you're going to move materials and ideas across national boundaries. So perfect example is the U.S. and oh baby just woke up. That's where you're going to spend a crazy night. This is where you're going to start talking about moving materials across the border of Mexico from the U.S. Right. So now that's where you're going to start talking about the maquiladora down in take the Texas Mexico area. But also you're going to have additional factors such as response time, inventory costs. So if McDonald's is operating in India, where they're going to store their inventory. If they're operating in an area like Singapore, Singapore is one of the most expensive countries in the world. Real estate's not cheap. Where am I going to store my inventory? Right? Am I going to partner with someone to share the cost of that inventory storage? I think that if I'm operating in Singapore, I'm going to kind of have lower inventory levels than I would here in the U.S. So those different considerations from a supply chain expansion perspective. So Joseph, why'd you say no? You're not going to share with anyone, which I all right. So while Joseph is typing that in, so the different strategies, you have an export strategy where you want to enter the market in what I refer to as a phased approach. You don't want to do a big bang approach where I'm going to enter in Canada and I'm going to release my product across the entire all of Canada. Right. I'm going to go into it with a phased approach. I'm going to go into Toronto, right? And then I'm going to expand to Montreal to another part of Canada, right? And I'm going to keep doing that phased approach to make adjustments to do a lessons learned on how is this product operating in Canada, right? So that is kind of an approach that those Canadian type companies have done in the past. So, for example, Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons is huge in Canada. So there are some Tim Hortons here in the U.S. And because Tim Hortons is kind of that known as a Canadian type retailer or organization or gas station, in Canada they put gravy on their French fries. right? It's a cultural thing. So, all of Tim Hortons are not going to introduce that particular menu item. They're going to look at those regions. So they're going to start looking at those Tim Hortons that are, close to the border of Canada, see how it works, and start moving down within the U.S. in that particular example. So you're going to you have a phased approach from an export strategy perspective. You're going to introduce new products slowly. In that, if it's a new product in the U.S. and we don't know how it's going to perform, we especially don't know how it's going to perform overseas, right, in another country. So that's another phased approach where you're going to phase in new products to assess the performance within that region. And then again, and most importantly, we're gonna keep referring to this one is whenever you're going to hire locally, where those people with that local experience is going to be very valuable in that they're going to understand the customer buying behaviors. Okay. So it's good to hire people with that experience, to hire people with that knowledge. So there's 5 different levels of purchasing. So with that domestic purchasing level, we're keeping all of our purchasing local. We're keeping all of the purchasing within the United States, for example. With the level 2, you are talking about you're going to purchase items as needed. We do not really have any partnerships with organizations. This has done a lot for our low value products. This has done a lot for our consumables. Like I always like to use the idea of the concept of screws. So if I am buying tons, like literally tons of screws, I really don't care about developing a relationship with that manufacturer. I just want my ocean freighter load, my ocean container full of screws, and I want it here on a certain date, and that's all the interaction we need to make. So that's that international purchasing where I purchase what I need. If it gets here when I need it, we have no problem. International global purchasing is where we're going to begin to develop that relationship, that partnership with that supplier. Where this is where you get a lot of this is where you introduce outsourcing. Um, this is where you begin to introduce outsourcing. Where if I am making a product, even if I'm doing a service, so in software development, so if I'm developing software, if I'm developing a phone application, if I'm developing an ERP system, and I need programmers, I'm going to outsource some programming over to India, right? Every single software company does it. So that's where you're going to have that international global purchasing, because if I have a large software development project that has to get done by a certain amount of time, I'm going to purchase the labor, I'm going to purchase the services of a development company in India, right? So that's where we come in when we talk about outsourcing, where I'm outsourcing my services, I'm going to outsource activities to a vendor, to a provider overseas. Okay. Next, level 4, that is where you're going to focus on a supplier capability. So, what is the supplier good at? Perfect example of this is that, okay, I'm manufacturing in one country, but like a country like India, right? So they have some logistical restrictions in some part of India. So I'm going to refer to an Indian freight company, an Indian logistics company, to handle all of my distribution of product. So that Indian distribution company is good at that. They're good at getting products from point A to point B. I'm not going to bother myself with that. So that's where you're going to have that global sourcing because I'm operating in the US, I'm manufacturing in India, so I'm going to depend on the expertise of that logistics organization within India itself, right? And then you have that global supply chain management aspect, and you have the integration where the quality comes into play. So again, we see a lot of this with food manufacturing. So if I'm manufacturing and I'm a food and beverage manufacturer, and I'm manufacturing in some international country. If I'm manufacturing in China, right? So quality is going to be very, very, very important, right? So so that's another consideration where you have those different levels where it begins at the bottom, I would say, where I just want to order a lot of product, a lot of low value, low risk product, and I just want it here. I just need it in those quantities, right? We really don't need a particular level of relationship. We don't need a particular level of interaction. So then you start increasing your engagement. You begin to increase your interaction with that supplier. So that's where we go when we talk about those levels of purchasing from a supply chain perspective. So with global logistics, we talk about a global distribution center. And whenever we talk about a global distribution center, I say think about Amazon, right? And with the current situation we're in, Amazon has been a household name for a lot of people within the last 6 months or so, right? And they were able to do that. They were able to meet the demands because of their global reach with all of their distribution centers. Now, Amazon has distribution centers. Amazon has a presence across all 50 states. They have distribution. They have in Pennsylvania, for example, they have 2 or 3 distribution centers, right? So whenever you go on Amazon Prime, you're able to get those products immediately because they have kind of decreased their reach. I mean, well, increased their reach, but decreased their, I guess, mile. I would say I'm not really thinking too well right now. So they have increased their efficiencies by increasing the number of facilities in which they have across the country and now around the world. So with Amazon, they have developed a inventory management model where they use tools to become efficient from a supply chain, from an inventory management perspective, from an inventory control perspective. So that's where you have that balance between the volume of inventory they carry as well as your overstock. So how much inventory you have for buffer inventory, if you will. With global logistics, you also have that packaging aspect where this is where we're going. I'm gonna hit reverse logistics here because it's lower down. But with packaging, we are seeing an emergence in terms of sustainable practices when it comes to packaging. Right? How much of this packaging can I recycle? How much of this packaging is reusable? I bring up this reverse logistics in that I was working with a aftermarket. Well, actually, no, it was not. It was a manufactured headlights, the largest headlight manufacturer in North America. It's outside of Peoria, Illinois, and because the big automakers, so I'm talking about Ford, I'm talking about Chevrolet, I'm talking about Chrysler, BMW. Whenever they would get headlights from this facility, because they were having a high number of broken headlights, they work with this manufacturer to develop packaging, to develop boxes, to with protective, with the that with material within those boxes to protect these headlights, right? So once the headlights were completed, then this manufacturer had a storage of these boxes in their facility for each manufacturer, for each automaker, and they would fill these boxes as those headlights were completed. And then once the truck would show up, that truck would have these boxes, these protective boxes from the last shipment, right? So they're taking empty boxes back to this manufacturer. They're moving those empty boxes back upstream, right? My manufacturer's upstream in the supply chain. And it's a reverse logistics program they put into place in that I am continually exchanging that packaging. I'm continually exchanging those boxes for protective materials, and it is continually saving my cost for every single auto manufacturer, right? So that's what I'm talking about when we talk about packaging. So it's a re that example is that I use reusable packaging, right? Which eliminated waste. It eliminated the organization's carbon footprint because now I'm not, wrapping up every single pallet of headlights and throwing away that packaging. I'm not throwing away those pallets that those headlights are on. I'm using this packaging, sending back those boxes that I used previously, those containers, I should say containers, those containers that I used previously, and I'm reusing them. So that's where that packaging and reverse logistics comes into play. Hopefully, you understood that example. That was a good project to be on when we talk about these different aspects. So also from a global expansion perspective, you have financial impacts that you have to consider. You have to, with that, when you're operating overseas, you have to store your money somewhere, right? So I mean, in most cases, you have those offerings, you have the wire transfers where you don't have to worry about a bank to have to worry about a bank where you have to store your capital overseas. But there are cases where companies have to do that. You have to, trust those banks, that they're going to store your millions of dollars that you're generating within that particular region. And also, you have to have insurance. A lot of organizations require, if you're operating overseas, you have to have some level of insurance from a credit perspective. Also, if you're operating in different parts of the world, you have to have like theft insurance. So, whenever I was operating in Juarez, Mexico, most companies where if you operate in Juarez, you have to have theft insurance, right? Because it's a high crime area. It's an area that performs a lot of manufacturing because of the maquiladora, and because there's a lot of manufacturing there, the people know that there's a lot of inventory and value within that geographical region. Those people know that these manufacturers are protected with their insurance. So they will steal, or try to rob, rob trucks, and these companies shouldn't. Of course, you shouldn't fight it. One, because of course it's a safety issue, and two, because you're protected from an insurance perspective. Now, on the flip side, the insurance companies know this. They know it's a high risk area, and they increase their the insurance costs for inventory within that geographical region. So you have those financial considerations that you have to think about from an inventory perspective, and whenever you're operating in an international space. So, any questions on that? So, other international considerations that you're going to have is going to be space considerations. So, what we mean by space considerations is going to be dock space, for example. So with dock space, because I'm going to have a lot of ocean shipments, I'm going to have a consideration from a dock perspective. Also even for trucks. So I have truck docks in a distribution center. How many slots do I have for those trucks to back up in? You also have truck space. So if I'm going to you go back to my headlight manufacturer, how many reusable containers can I fit into a given truck? Right? If I understand how many containers I can fit into a truck, I know exactly how many headlights I can fit into a truck. So you have those considerations. The availability of third-party transportation. So am I going to use a third-party logistics company? Am I going to use FedEx? Am I going to use USPS? Am I going to use Pittsky? Or am I going to develop a fleet of my own trucks? So those are some considerations that we have from an international perspective. Now, again, if I'm operating internationally, in most cases, I'm going to use a third party logistics provider. I'm going to use a provider within that country that's what they do. That's their core competency. That's all they do. So they're good at it. All right. And because there's going to be some considerations within that region that aren't required here in the U.S. And then again, that geographical location is kind of what I was referring to. From an ocean freight perspective, we have to have those considerations of, am I going to buy additional inventory just to fill up a container? Right. So you have to that full container load, less than container load, full truckload, less than truckload. You're going to hear those references when we talk about supply chain management, and you have to perform those considerations to say, okay, am I going to pay additional cost to have a less than truckload shipment to sit to my facility? Or am I just going to go ahead and fill this truck up because my inventory does not expire, my inventory does not spoil, and I know I'm going to use it, so I'm just going to fill up a truckload. So those considerations. And then also, how am I going to make payments? Am I going to do wire transfers? Am I going to do a send a check? And things like that. Because those, if you're performing a number of transactions overseas, those hidden fees, I would refer to them as somewhat mount up. So, whenever we look at the benefits to global supply chain management and operating in a global environment, the pros or benefits is we have access to more suppliers, and now you're making yourself available to additional opportunities. You're able to leverage, those additional suppliers in quality negotiations, in pricing negotiations. So you're opening yourself up to additional suppliers, additional opportunities, additional knowledge, right? Additional competencies. We talked about the quality aspect. We talked about the lower cost aspect. When we talk about flexible technology, we're going to talk about lean manufacturing and mass customization next week, I believe. So you have those considerations, and you have that advancement in technology. So there's one thing that is near and dear to me with blockchain. Blockchain is, I talk a lot about blockchain. If you're interested in that concept, you can go to YouTube and type in my name, and I did a number of TED Talks on that topic in terms of how blockchain integrates with supply chain management and logistics. So people think that these concepts are blockchain, artificial intelligence are a thing of the future, but those technologies are already here from a supply chain perspective. They're already being implemented from a supply chain perspective. The the pandemic actually kick-started the development of artificial intelligence within the supply chain world, given that organizations are going to they're going to struggle with their forecasting and their demand planning for years, because this, as I said before, the pandemic provided artificial spikes in terms of demand for certain industries. For example, perfect example, toilet paper. So when Procter and Gamble when Procter and Gamble at this time, right now, because it's coming up right now. So when Procter and Gamble is getting forecasts in August, they're going to they're going to have artificial forecasts, because that demand from March, that spike when everyone was trying to find toilet paper in March, is now showing up and being built into into Procter and Gamble's forecast. Right, so they're going to see a huge spike in toilet paper and toilet tissue, and they're going to know exactly where it came from. But there's going to be, and this is a highly overlooked area, is there are dependent products on items that you have not seen or even thought about before. So dependent items is, because of the pandemic, we've seen a spike in toilet tissue, right? But a dependent item could be like ointment, something like that, right? That you didn't even think of. Two unrelated products where you would see a spike because of an environmental factor, right? So you're going to have those problems. You're going to see a spike in inventory items. I mean, the toilet paper is an easy one. I would say that the items that are dependent on the toilet paper, like ointment and things like that, or baby wipes, right? Because people could not find toilet paper, they were using baby wipes, right? So organizations are going to see a spike in baby wipes, right? And they're going to purchase those baby wipes, and they're going to have, yeah, that was me too, Lauren. They're going to have cases. They're going to have cases of baby wipes in inventory drying up literally, because there's a spike into unrelated products, right? So you're going to have those issues, and companies are using artificial intelligence to tell them, hey, there's a spike here, but it's not real. It's not real, because people were buying this product. People were buying baby wipes because they couldn't find toilet tissue. Right. So that's where you're using these emerging technologies to inform you of why the system is telling you to do this. That makes sense? So the cons and drawbacks. So you're going to have, so we said that, okay, we're using international logistics to cut costs. So why is this bullet on here of increased costs? Well, it's because that there's hidden costs. So there's a concept that we refer to often, and even the best companies do not do it. In that, I always ask the question of organizations as, what is your landed cost of this product you're getting from China? Yes, you're bragging about how much it costs you per piece. It costs you 15 cents a piece to make it, but what's the landed cost for that shipment, right? You're not including the tariffs that you have to pay. You're not including any kind of duties that you have to pay. You're not considering any kind of transportation costs you have in China, plus the transportation costs you had to get from the port to your facility that's 2 hours away, into the cost of your product, your landed cost of your product, right? A lot of organizations simply look at the purchase price of the item and do not consider those hidden costs, where those costs per product could be more than the item itself. So I could have an item that costs me 15 cents a piece, but once I've added all the landed costs, the landed cost, right? The duties, the transportation fees, and all this and all that. I might be 40 cents just in landed cost alone, even before I even include the purchase costs. So that is where those hidden costs, those landed costs, are very important. Um, you also will have the international standards and considerations that you have to consider. Now we talked about corporate social responsibility, and we talked about the global reporting initiative, which is a global reporting initiative is voluntary in terms of corporate social responsibility. And with some countries such as and Indonesia, India, and I think there's a few others where they practice what we refer to as mandatory corporate social responsibility. So that is a standard from the country that makes organizations that operate in those countries have a focus on the environment, a focus on the workers, right? Outside of the profitability of the organization. So if you don't do that, if you don't address environmental concerns, if you do not meet environmental mandates, the leaders of the organization go to jail, right? And it's published. So pretty much unethical practices that people in the U.S. do almost daily. Leaders go to jail for that in some countries. Indonesia, you're going to jail for it. So you have those concerns that you have to be aware of. There's a lot of other regulatory compliance. So India has a lot of regulatory compliance issues in terms of trucks on the roads and things like that. Um, in New York City, you can't drive, you can't have a truck in the city for a certain during certain times. So, and another interesting fact is that I had one student that worked for FedEx, and she said that FedEx budgets over $1 million each year in New York because of tickets. They know what's happening. They already put that in their budget, in their operating budget. Because if they get stopped, the cops know that FedEx is going to be all over New York City. So the cops are looking out for FedEx to fund the department, right? Because they know that FedEx is going to buy it, or USPS is going to pay for it. So those are the standards, in New York, because you can relate to New York, but other countries may have similar mandates like that. Cultural barriers, we talked about that with India and McDonald's. And then you have those increased risks. So you have the increased risk of operating within Juarez. So because Juarez has a high level of theft, from a manufacturing and inventory perspective, you have increased risk of operating in Juarez. Then you have the labor force issue of child labor and things like that. Then you also have politics. So bribery is commonplace in some countries. Bribery in some countries is almost expected, right? So if you have a prospect in China, for example, if you're speaking with the leader of the organization, that leader is expecting a valuable gift, right? So their thought process in China is saying, if I'm going to give you millions of dollars from a partnership perspective, I want a gift. I want a gift to help me in making my decision, right? So bribery is expected from business dealings in countries such as China, and you're going to have different levels of bribery in different parts of the country, or different parts of the world, I should say. So as you are looking for content for this week's discussion, you have the resources in the CTU Center in terms of the SEM 210 resource page. You have the Muse resources, and you also have the CTU library. You have Google Scholar. So just to go here really quick on Google Scholar, I point out Google Scholar because it's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite sites to look at for research. So one thing with Google Scholar is that if you put a search term in parentheses, so if I type in international supply chain and I type in Tesla, so what's going to happen is that it's going to look at all journal articles, and it's going to look to find those key terms within the actual text, not just in the title, in the text itself, and give you those articles. And also, in most cases, will give you a summary of where that pops up in that particular article. So that's why I like Google Scholar the most. And in most cases, you're going to get the article here. So let's just see. So there, I might have to read this one myself. This one's from 2020. We're talking about international supply chain. We're talking about blockchain. We're talking about Tesla. We're talking about everything I like. Actually, I'm going to bookmark this one. This one might be good. so you're gonna get the topics, and again, you're gonna get a quick synopsis of what that article's about, and then in the abstract, you can go and see. You can go and see. Yeah, this is gonna be good. You're going to see what this particular article is about, what they're studying, and then in most cases down here at the last two sentences or so, you're going to get what their results are from that study. So you have the Muse, you have the library, but I love Google Scholar because you can get quick results simply by putting your search terms in quotes. Okay. So that's the last thing I want to talk about tonight's session. Are there any questions on the night session or any questions on the assignment this week? Nope. All right. So thanks again for joining. Thank you for your patience and have a great night. And I'll see you on the discussion boards. Thank you.